I'm Shana Nys Dambrot. For those who don't know, I'm an art critic based in Los Angeles. And you are?
I am Nikolas Soren Goodich, an artist also based in Los Angeles.
And this is your work.
So excited, Lancaster and Museum of Art and History. I'm so happy that they have me here.
You really are. It's so cute because we're friends, full disclosure, so there might be a little low-key buffoonery on the proceedings.
Naturally.
But it's just, I'm looking at you and I'm like, my heart is so full because I know that like, you're like a proper hardworking professional, but I'm your friend. And I also saw your face change just now. And I think it's because like, you're genuinely in your heart so excited about this exhibition and the opportunity that you're like trying to stay calm, but you're actually so excited.
Yes.
And I love that energy from you, so I just want to honor that. So I do a lot of these artist talks, and I've settled in recent months on a kind of cute place to start because it sounds funny, but it often is the best way in, which is just literally to say, Nikolas, what are we looking at?
Well, we're looking at years of work all brought together. So about 4 years. And what we're looking at is my dream of layering glass, plexiglass, because glass is super heavy, and there's some glass which you'll see later. Layering plexiglass and finding a way to make a painting where it's pulled apart, where it's pulled out, where it's not just a flat surface. And more than that, then letting light into the work.
A lot of the energy before we even get to like what they're about is literally bound up in how they're made and this very unique, I would say proprietary process that you've specifically developed with that goal in mind to have light and energy seem to be kind of captured in them.
Yeah. Well, I love that you've got these panels. I've always loved glass, and there's this sort of magic that glass has, whether it's a television screen or windows or even car windows. There's this thing with light and vision and visual and film and photography. And it's all kind of wrapped up into one big, world. And so I started with, and I've talked about this before, I started off with Scotch tape, and I would take drawings and then I would put Scotch tape over the drawings, and then I'd draw on top of that. And I started to be able to kind of make these layers happening where I was sort of capturing what I had done. And then I started,
you graduated to expensive tape.
Well, yeah, to really expensive tape, then Mylar, and then to plexiglass. But so once I get to plexiglass, you've got this density, this solid structure that is stiff. And the surface itself becomes like this, well, you get two sides, so you get two surfaces that you're working with. Basically I start to like invent this thing where I'm pouring paint on a surface, and then I'm printing from one side to the other. So it's a monoprint. Everything in all the works in this show are basically monoprints. And one of the things I love about it is that once you do one thing, and you were just kind of alluding to this, that is it. It has to be, it's sort of like...
It worked or it didn't.
Well, I try to do it so that it always works, because if I trust myself...
Me too.
If I trust myself to make certain decisions, then I know that it's going to work and it's going to add up throughout the piece. So each piece has multiple layers. And those multiple layers are the prints added up, and then there's duplicates. So there's a lot of symmetry and asymmetry, but it's also about, so there's about like the side of the paint that's on the one side of the glass, the side of the paint that's on this side of the glass, the texture of the paint, the way the density of color, light, and dark shifts between them.
So there's like, if you're looking at this, which is mounted, so it's no longer translucent, there's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 painted surfaces in this.
Yes.
And so that can...
And that's part of how it becomes more sculptural. Yeah. You get this depth, you get shadow, you get light. So there's
movement.
You get, as you move across the painting, you see it, not only do the reflections change it, but the edges of this physical painted surface change it, yes.
And then that's a really good segue, I think, into kind of, you know, the meaning or the content aspect of it. Because I personally think that this technique would work even in the complete absence of anything you would consider a figure. And I think the further it goes, and we'll see some in there that are much more tightly figurative, but I think it
and
goes,
one here that's much more abstract.
exactly.
Yeah.
But I think the technique would work even if it were pure abstraction, which again, at the, kind of the bigger they get, the more it seems like that anyway, and so it's already doing that. However, it happens to be, and it's kind of, to my mind, not that much of an accident, that the folding you're describing is also kind of like the Rorschach test thing.
Yes.
Because these are
Freud
actually all an image, and the image actually is all self-portraits.
Well,
okay, I'm sorry.
No.
Tell me why I'm not quite right about that, because I know, but it's good.
So I was saying to Shana earlier, so I had an incredible teacher, this black painter artist teacher at RISD, and he taught me how, you know, really everything an artist makes is basically kind of a self-portrait. You could just sort of see it that way. It's a truism, but it's true. So when I make these portraits, which I refer to as profile portraits, when I'm drawing them with my hand, that has this act of self-portraiture. You're creating a face. What face do you know? You know your face. That's what you really know. But when I use this printmaking process where I print from one side to the other, the paint totally altered. And when that's altered, it means that the face becomes a whole other thing, a whole other person. And so when I pull the surface off, I discover a whole other person. And I love that, because I'm trying to make work that's for everyone and for all people, not just about me in any sense whatsoever. And that is kind of how that occurs. This piece is actually a good one to talk about, because so I see this as enslaved Africans under on the bottom of a boat. They're upside down. Being upside down is something that people feel uncomfortable. It's like there's a tension.
Now would be a good time to tell a little bit about your actual autobiography, though, I think.
Okay. Well, you know, I went through some pretty incredibly difficult.
Not that part.
Oh, okay, the other stuff.
Your family tree.
Yeah. Well, as you see this piece over here, which we'll get to, is it's a portrait of my black grandfather William and my white grandfather William. So my black grandfather William was the grandson of an enslaved preacher from Alabama. My white grandfather William came from Kiev during the pogroms in about 1906 or 1911. My great-grandmother Rose dressed him up as a little girl because the Cossacks were conscripting all boys 6 and older. I don't know how why they picked 6, but so he had to dress up as a little girl to get out of the Ukraine. So, yeah.
So just to say, and so that doubling, and I always forget your grandfathers have the same name, which is another thing. As you kind of start to swim through some of those waters of like trauma in your background, trauma in your family tree, everybody has a version of what that is. Yours is particularly like narratively eye-opening and unexpected, but everyone has the thing or things they carry with them, and everyone's journey is a journey to go through and out the other side of that. And so even though there is a huge level of very specific autobiography and very specific demons that need excising in this work, as you said in the beginning, the work is about what it means to get past and through that. And so that's where it kind of switches from being for you and your soul to for everyone and whatever their thing is that meets that moment.
Well, and so here you have a piece that I love metaphor, abstraction, how language is so open. But so to discover as I'm making a piece that there's the old me and the new me, but that word me doesn't have to be me. That's you. So, but the fact that the way the layers created and came together, where there's this sense of how, you know, as we get older, we decay, we you know, all these sort of things, and then this feels like youth. So to have visual metaphors connect to narrative metaphors, it feels very good to me. And then to have the title speak, you know, have it really speak to that, and that shows up in some other different ways in the work.
Yeah, and I think you could argue that the physical process we described earlier, we can all see how that kind of overlays. Like it's not just, like there's some meaning in the way that you do what you're doing that ties in directly to the idea.
Absolutely.
So it would be enough, Diana, if these were conventionally executed paintings about that topic. It would still be quite moving. And these would be really compelling if there were no imagery or storyline whatsoever on that merits of line and color and light.
Right.
But
when
what we're looking at is those two
together.
things join.
Yes.
Exactly.
So entheogenic transubstantiation is the idea that the body of Christ is LSD or mushrooms, and that by taking that psychedelic substance, you are transcending trauma. You're transcending. So that's like that's a pretty heavy shit. Excuse my French.
Okay.
And Kindred Spirit Serenity Memoir, there's like this connection between the two ideas, and using cool colors and warm colors, and one being like a idea of a physical, you know, psychedelic experience or religious transcendent experience, and one being something that's much more grounded in just calm and acceptance. And
you can see, because of the color choices, that the yellow one, the two faces are much more clearly rendered, and the blue one that's more psychedelic it's still faces, but it's kind of like inverted space, and it has that sort of like Carl Jung Red Book mandala vision quality to it.
Absolutely.
And so you explain it, and then you see it, and it's right there.
Yes.
That's amazing. All right, so we're gonna.
And this one is the abstract
and
one.
this is the most abstract one. So say a few words about that, and then everybody come this way as we go into the other room, and you'll see what he just said.
The one that is the most abstract has the title that also speaks to abstraction. Surrender to the entropic fate of all matter. So we are literal, we exist, but we also know that in reality we will decay and cease to exist and become star stuff, or if we were star stuff, etc. And this piece, which has electromagnetic energy and has this like cosmic kind of shifting subatomic particles, and there's faces in it, but they're almost non-existent. Like they've completely almost turned into just a total abstract forms. And we were talking about this in the car too. So like, this one is the piece that's about my black grandfather William and my white grandfather William. Obviously, it doesn't look like them. It's, you know, but the reality is that here you have some pieces have one layer of plexi, some have two, some have three, some have four. Has achieved a really intense amount of depth. I'm not exactly sure why, because there's all sorts of, like you said, alchemy, you know, of the way the things come together. But this piece absorbs so much light, and then on top of it, it has this rainbow metaphor, which is the only time I've used it. And again, so it's form connecting with content, connecting with narratives, all three of the same. Right?
Well, I think the prism thing that happens with the rainbow.
Exactly.
Pokes at
Thank you.
Stained glass in a way that, if you think about it, they all do, but is like just a little bit more explicit in something like that, where you have this kind of reified, like central figure of figures radiating out light from the center, and the scale of it. And so I feel like that might be part of what you're feeling, is because to my mind, this is the most like stained glass out of all of them, even though ironically it's mounted on a canvas and opaque in that way. So for me, that's what happens. And also the distance, because you can really see the shadow, like a physical, like the way clouds look on the ground between the figure and the ground behind them. And I think that that spacing was just, you know, a really, you kind of, even more than in any of the other ones, have a sense that there's like stuff back there you can't quite see. And then you want to move your body to see if you can see it, and you're engaged kind of with your whole body in the piece and not just your eyes. And I think all of that kind of amplifies itself.
So my black grandfather.
I just love that it's always my black grandfather William and my white grandfather William, like that's their whole names. Right? Was one Bill or Billy? We'll never know, and it doesn't matter.
They were both Billy. They were both Bill, you know, but so of course they never met. They never even lived in the same state, you know, one died much before the other, etc. But so then back to the self-portrait, like, what do they know? They know me. And so presenting them is like presenting me, but then it's also, so one of the things that I've always loved mythology, and when I first made one of the first pieces that had this form of the two faces back to back looking away from each other, I immediately was like, okay, Janus, the god of past, present, and future, is a Roman god representing past, present, and future. And so having my past, present, and future connect to this, it's not universal, but to this bigger mythology that goes back into ancient history, and then having Newton, who is also quite actually religious. He's thought of as like the most amazing scientist ever, but he was actually like really into alchemy, and he's really into religion and spirituality. So to have all those things kind of come together into one piece, and I, honestly, I could talk a lot more about, but for me is really, that's basically what, so people are like, oh, how do you know when your work is done? How do you know when a piece is done, you know? So I can remember being in the studio and having, you know, taken the pieces of plexiglass and moved them around a bunch of different ways, and then finally put them this way and go, oh, boom, and it's like this nuclear explosion in my head of like all the stuff I was just describing to you guys just now. I see it being realized in the work. Now this piece took me 2 years to finish, and that means staring at it for 2 years, like different permutations of it, and try to figure out what's going on. I even like signed up for some like class in Italy with like this incredible like communists and African American like professors to just try to dig deep into like how I could understand how to use the rainbow and how I could understand how to use this. But it worked, and it finally came together, and I really, you know, made me very happy.
Yeah, and I'm noticing too in this one, it's in all of them, but the way in which I know that it's kind of just what happens because properties of physics and wet pigment, when you smush them together and pull them apart, they kind of suck back into that fractal pattern that looks like lightning or capillaries or veins. And that's also, I mean, it happens because of the process, oh well. But if we're talking about, you know, our epigenetic identity and our ancestry as, you know, part of manifesting who we are as a person in the present, it's very interesting to me that there's this kind of vascular almost iconography that goes with it. Because that's
well, and to have that played up
context
against this geometry of light. So we think of prisms, and we think of Newton, and we think of that image of light being divided up into spectrums. So to have that juxtaposed against this super organic, like you said, arterial or fractal,
macro,
or clouds,
micro.
So it's ideas and experience. It's the physical world and the mental world.
It's good. It's a good piece. I get it. I love it. All right. First of all, wow. Biggest one. That's
the biggest wall piece yet. Yeah.
Okay.
7 by 14 feet.
Which is amazing.
Or 6 by 14.
The pink is insane. The pink is a choice.
Yeah. Well, so the painting is called Ocean Womb Destroyer. And maybe it's like the most directly ecological, maybe it's the most directly about like the climate crisis, maybe it's not, but the thing is that there's something about action.
Yeah, I love this like outward laser eye, like this radiating.
Well, I always am thinking about this like lights coming into our eyes, but we're choosing to look. There's this directional thing happening. We make choices about what we do out in the world, and we do it based on what we see. So if we are destroying the natural world, we're making that choice, and we're doing it based on our direct experience with the world. So, and I try to deal with paradoxes. So instead of presenting this person as dark, so I used to make a lot of work that was really dark. There was a dark period in my life, or just I was younger, or whatever. And when I started making this whole body of work, I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to find ways to transcend that kind of limit. What I felt for myself was limited color choices because of what it communicated, not just out of like design ideas. And so this is a piece that, just like I was talking about with my grandfather's piece, when I realized what it was starting to be about, I realized that these people, these faces, had to be the brightest, most sunniest, most like joyful, most warm set of colors possible, because it just turns the whole idea on its head. It makes the title turn itself inside out. It makes your idea of what the piece is about. So you might see it at first and you think, wow, this is like the center of the sun, or this is like this explosion of, I don't know, fireworks or something. It just has this like super energetic, passionate, joyful element. And then you read the title and you're like, whoa, what's that? At least that's how I felt about it.
I agree. And I think this is a really good segue into speaking about the other aspect of what you do, which is hinted at with this piece and with the piece where the V shaped in the other room. But the other part of your Instagram handle is public artist. And so that is not just wishful thinking. Like, there's an aspect of all this practice.
Not just wishful thinking.
Well, I'm saying you're not just like, it's for the public. I'm saying it's quite literally like action items.
Yeah.
There are large scale and planned architectural scale, like a building that essentially is going to be made out of this. Yeah. Now, engineering has entered the chat, probably can't be plexiglass, whatever, but basically understand it as this, but it's a building. And the intentions for these and other already ones that exist, like in Melissa Morgan Sculpture Garden in Palm Springs, that are like that scale, this scale, but designed to live outdoors, is all of the principles we've discussed here today, except fully immersed in natural light. Just definitionally it's outside. The pavilion ones might have their own lighting structure as well, so that they light up at night. So you're basically like, everything you see in this room, imagine it as a building, and you are not that far off. That's the idea.
Which this scale speaks to directly. So I'm like, okay, I want to make a wall. How do I make a wall? Well, I got to make as big a piece as possible. Or how do I make a wall? I make a piece like this that's two-sided. So imagine this as that wall, and then you start to get to where
and see it incorporated as some version of both a potential gathering place and a place of solitary meditation.
Absolutely. Both.
Shelter, spectacle, safety.
Yeah. A safe space and a place where people can create their own kind of understanding. Like you said, like personal or as a group. And that is something that I think, if you look at the faces, there's like this question happening. Often, looking outwards, but also looking in. So like if you look at this piece here, this is a reflection of this person looking right at themselves, like a mirror of themselves.
Right, and so the idea that you'd be in a park and instead of a monument to some nonsense, you'd see this beacon, this light box. You're not sure what you're looking at. You get up to it. You can go inside. So all your fantasies about, I wish I could go inside that art. I wish I could see behind that picture. You can walk into it. I can only imagine what a bright sunny day would do to the color situation inside a box like that, right? And so it's all of the things that you're hoping to accomplish in the painting, but at physical architectural scale, and also therefore culturally at like societal scale, right? Because it's for even more, if it's in a park, it's for even more everyone than in a free museum. As great as a free museum is, a park is even more everyone, right? You're walking to work and there it is. And so, but what I'm obsessed with is this idea that from the tiniest sketch in the studio made with Scotch tape to a literal building on a college campus, camp somewhere,
Central Park.
The same thing. It's the same. What you do is the same throughout all of the iterations along the way. And I, as a writer, I just love the shape of that, the idea of that. That what you do doesn't really change except in the physical ways that it has to, and even then not that much.
Well, and that's true, and then also that there's an incredible amount of difference inside of each piece in terms of how color, layers of color interact, how those colors shift and change, so that like a piece, we were discovering, Cynthia's here, we were discovering when we lit this piece, at first I was like, oh, I don't know if we should light it, because maybe, you know, we want the light that's on the inside to do its thing. But then when we started lighting it, we realized that the more light, and this gets to what you're saying about the sun going through, like the building structure idea, the more we lit it, the more the colors warmed up or cooled down or became more brilliant. And so like, the more light we can get to the piece, the more beautiful it becomes.
Which is a pretty fantastic metaphor for life while we're here.
Yes.
Right? What did you say?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to blow your mind right now. We've been talking for 35 minutes. Because that's how much fun we're having.
I know.
I love you so much.
Is the myth of Sisyphus. So in the ancient Greek mythology, Sisyphus is been cursed to push a huge boulder up a hill. And when he gets to the top, so it's basically the same thing as Perseus and all these other guys with the, you know, but if he gets to the top of the hill and the rock rolls back down again, and he's cursed that he has to keep doing it over and over again. And so as a kid, I was like, okay, that's a great metaphor for how difficult life is. That's a great metaphor for just trying to achieve anything. And it's a great metaphor for just how we can't stop trying, right? We can't stop as humans trying. So this piece is called Sisyphus on the top of the mountain, seeing their reflection on the top of the mountain in their fleeting moments on the top of the mountain. So I skipped over the pushing the hill, up the hill. He's at the top of the mountain, which is what we're all trying to do with our lives, to make our lives beautiful and better. And here he is, and he's questioning it, he's looking at himself, because what does he really see on the top of the mountain? He sees himself, I mean, because he's and it's just a metaphor for being an artist, certainly, right? And it's a metaphor for the fact that 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I was like, can I figure out how to make work like this? How can I make work that I had in my mind? And how can I make work that's successful in and of itself as a piece of art? And so that narrative is inherent to this piece, and it's also connected to these bigger narratives that are part of our lives.
Yeah, and I love that because, you know, ultimately, there's, you know, if there's one thing that you would characterize the narrative of this work at is like transcending, right? And so it's sort of like if Sisyphus is your model, it's like, I wonder what would happen if he ever got that fucking rock just like 1 inch farther and maybe it stayed there or rolled in the other direction one time. And, you know, it has to happen sometime, right? Right? Otherwise, what
people ask me like, oh, you know, what's success as an artist? I mean, other artists, younger artists, whatever. And I always say like, if you're making art, that is success.
Yeah.
Because you're literally achieving your own creative potential, and that is what is like, that is transcendence, and that is what is the most beautiful thing, because you know, we're in a world that has such there's so much horrible stuff. And if we can make bits and moments of beauty that we feel for ourselves and for others.
Yeah. I believe the same, and that's why we're friends. And I also think that, you know, you've been doing this for years, but it happens to be that it's being offered the most publicly to the world now at a time when I, not to overstate it, feel like we could use it even more.
Absolutely.
If the message is transcend it, find your humanity, celebrate the beauty, keep pushing the damn rock, it'll be okay. I can't think of a week, a literal week,
right,
when people needed to be told something like that more than this week. And so, you know, here, that's wondering what the art's for, that's what it's for.
Yes.
And even though you've been doing it for years, there's something about it feels like today, and I think that's the mitzvah. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
So thank you.